Recording in progress.
Welcome into the latest episode of the Betting the Pitch Soccer Podcast. I'm your host, @real_G Warner. You can find me across all social media platforms at @real_G Warner. We are on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. If you want to leave a 5-star review, it's huge for the search rankings. If you want to subscribe to YouTube, @real_G Warner is the place to do it. You can get the 1-minute YouTube shorts and the 1 minute or so Instagram Reels at @real_G Warner on Instagram as well. And of course, if you want to get all my plays across all sports, including the Major League Baseball season, postseason starting tomorrow, really early afternoon here in the United States, do that. Patreon.com/@real_G Warner. I'm going to make sure everyone knows that we're live as we just wrapped up some really boring Monday Night Football games where I lost all my fantasy leagues and did get guillotined in the league. If you've been following along with those videos, those are also available on Instagram.com/@real_G Warner. Unfortunately, I guess I'm done there. But, the future is bright, and we've got Champions League coming back tomorrow. Also, we have a rain-postponed La Liga match as well that I'm keen on. But we're going to go through each of the matches, going to give out a best bet based on my favorite from Tuesday, my favorite from Wednesday, and decide which one to be graded on. We're 3-2 so far this season. Started out 3-0. Still catching up on a lot of soccer matches, of course, but we're here. It's time to get started. Thank you, those of you that are here live, and let's get into it. So we're going to start not in La Liga. We're going to start in the Champions League. That's where I was meaning to go. And we'll start in the first match of the day. Atalanta, half-a-goal favorites right now at home to Club Bruges. Total is 3, juiced pretty heavily to under. And I think we saw Bruges, shock the world maybe, but they've done that. They've had deep runs in Champions League before. It's been a couple years, but ultimately I'm impressed by Bruges always and feel like they're a great team to back, especially at home. Different scenario here is, and they were kind of a surprise favorite, I thought, to Monaco in the opener. But now they are playing in the early window yet again, but on the road at Atalanta in Bergamo, Italy. And that is a bit of a concern for me because this is a different squad at home versus what it is away. So a little bit, I guess, of juice on the Bruges side, most of it on Atalanta at this point. So maybe we get a 3/4 of the goal. That was what I was expecting coming into this matchup. The total at 3 is interesting because Atalanta were a go for it all the time goal scoring team under Gian Piero Gasperini. He's moved to Roma, and that's not gone great to start at Roma just yet. And Atalanta, I still am not necessarily a believer. They didn't have a great time against PSG in the opener, but who would at the Parc des Princes? So at this point, I think this is a big match for Atalanta to kind of get as far as they can along, or I guess steady the ship in this European competition. I don't know necessarily if there's, a 4-0 loss in the opener is not the great way to start, especially with goal differential being a problem. But I think I'm basically treating all Champions League as like league play in your domestic competition, because it's a similar story. You want the most points, you want a good goal differential, but I still think the win is more important than winning 3-0. I think a lot of times the favorites will be protecting their lead late, especially because they know the quality in this competition. And I think that's a problem for some squads here. And I don't know necessarily that at a half of a goal, that's much of a thing. But as Atalanta climb to a 3/4 goal favorite, that does give, I think, a little bit more value on Bruges if you think they can hang around. For my best bet on this one, I'm definitely interested in Bruges as a road underdog. I don't know that I feel great about unders yet with this Atalanta side, but I do like to push on 3. That's generally a key number for me. So I'll lean to Bruges getting a half of a goal and under 3. Move next to Kairat Almaty hosting Real Madrid, and probably the biggest home game they've ever had. Certainly feels that way. Currently, Kairat 2 3/4 goal underdogs at home. A little bit more juice on Real Madrid. Totals 3 3/4. Juice pretty heavily to over right now. Real Madrid, we'll see what they are this season. Still trying to figure out who they are under Xavi Alonso, long-time player, very overrated manager at Bayer Leverkusen, in my humble opinion, but their results did certainly work. So maybe that's somewhat deserved. But they had to run Carlo Ancelotti out of town, who was so good at Real Madrid for years and years and years. And I think we're seeing that it's the same type of story, that Kylian Mbappe is just, he's not going to defend for his club team. He just wants to score goals. And he and Vinny Jr. don't really work together. The nice part is they're playing a club that has no business being in Champions League, but I do, I guess, appreciate the spreading of the wealth across not just the biggest clubs in Europe. And Kairat Almaty will put up a big crowd. I wonder how many Real Madrid fans will be there, because I'm sure there's plenty in that soccer nation, but there's not a lot for me to do in the early window in the second one. Real Madrid can probably name their score line, but I would be interested if they struggle. Moving next to the big window of matches on Tuesday. Like I said, I'll come out with a Tuesday favorite and then a Wednesday favorite. Most likely not a betting favorite at Joe Dollar. I know you doubted that. Probably your ears perked up right when you heard that and were about to call me out. But I'm also going to check to make sure that the audio is working. Audio check, thumbs up. Thank you, Anderson Hernandez. That's exactly why I was coming here. Thanks for joining in late night. I guess 10:35 Central Time. Not so bad, especially after Monday Night Football just wrapped up. But I appreciate you being here. You're consistent, and I certainly appreciate that. We'll move to Marseille, 1.25 goal favorites to Ajax right now. Total is 3, just a little bit more to under, and a couple cents more to the Ajax side. So numbers bigger than I expected, so I lean automatically to Ajax getting more than a goal. With all that said, Marseille, I felt like they got absolutely screwed completely by an inept referee from a smaller nation, which I guess the Bosnians need to get experience somewhere and somehow, and they have to do it at Champions League level somewhere. But I mean, calling a handball penalty on a player who had just made a sliding tackle and was bracing himself, it's literally in the rules. And I guess it's an inability, or just, it seems to me it's kind of like American sport, the NFL, and more so Major League Baseball, where they just don't overturn anything unless it's painfully obvious. But to me, that was a clear violation of the rules, and the referees are pretty inept in a lot of places, but especially ones that are working at Champions League level that, I mean, have been all around Europe and in Europa League and such, and probably in Champions League before. But I'm pretty disappointed in that, and I feel like Marseille deserved a draw there. I'm glad it didn't swing anything, that Marseille were able to cover the spread in full as a 1.5 goal underdogs on the road at the Bernabeu in Madrid, but felt criminal. And Marseille, anything they say complaining about it, I'm totally on board. So Ajax, though, they played, and really the story of Ajax is interesting because they basically had one of the best clubs in all of Europe and were going deep into Champions League, then pretty much sold all their top talent, a lot to Manchester United that went with Erik ten Hag, and they didn't really place it very well. They brought in a sporting director from the Bundesliga in Germany. That went poorly after he was, I think it was Max whatever from Borussia Mönchengladbach, and that didn't go great. And then for some reason they thought he'd be good, but in Holland, but then I guess he's found his way to Bayern München too. So like, who knows? Clearly he's got some pictures of somebody, but Ajax have been pretty bad, and they were not playing in Champions League last year. They didn't look very prepared. I think conceded 2 goals off of headers on corner kicks to Inter Milan in their opener of the Champions League this year. And that's not a great setup, especially not a great thing going to the Stade Orange Velodrome in Marseille, because Marseille are really good. I think they have one of the best crowd supports out there, and that's going to be a big problem. I don't know necessarily that it's worth more than a goal of favoritism here. And so that for that reason, I'm still interested in Ajax. I think any team that's getting more than a goal that I think is competitive is certainly going to be interesting in this competition, especially coming from lower leagues. You could argue that Holland's not much lower than Marseille, but at this point, to me, I'm interested in Ajax getting a goal and a quarter. Move next to Paphos FC. They're hosting Bayern München. Another gigantic home crowd expected for one of the European giants coming to Cyprus, I believe is where Paphos is. Paphos 2.5 goal underdogs, usually split both ways. Totals 3.5, just all the way to over. And I would expect Paphos to do everything they can to keep a clean sheet as long as possible. I just don't expect that to go on very long, so there's not much interest for me there. Next, we move to Bodo Glimt. They're hosting Tottenham Hotspur of the English Premier League. Currently, Bodo Glimt are a 1/4 goal underdog. Almost all the juice on Tottenham. Total is 3, juice pretty heavily to under as well. Tottenham have looked like a goal-scoring team, and that's certainly something Thomas Frank was able to find with much weaker, less talented players at Brentford in his previous stop. Just switched from west to northern London, it seems, or west to north London. And I think the big question, though, is Tottenham have so many skilled players and so much talent. There's one soccer ball, that's an issue. Who plays? That's another issue. So I think there's clearly a huge talent discrepancy here. And Bodo Glimt, I think at home is where you want to play them. I believe they're on artificial turf, which is always a problem for the big clubs across Europe. I don't know if they're all worried about ripping their knee up like neighbors did at MetLife Stadium and for the New York Giants this weekend if you're cross-pollinating college American pro football with the European side. But I think the only way I could lean is against Tottenham because I they need to prove that they have it together, because I don't believe that they do. So I'll lean to that quarter of a goal. Bodo Glimt are really a goal scoring side from their time in the other European competitions, Europa League and such. So that's not really a great setup trying to outscore Tottenham. But at home, I think they've got a good chance, good possibility. And it might just mean that I'm more interested in fading Tottenham in their Premier League match this weekend. But we'll move to the next one, and that's Inter Milan hosting Slavia Prague. So Inter, 1.5 goal favorites, a little bit more juice. Total is 3, juice pretty heavily to over. Slavia Prague, I saw them play live at Roma a few seasons ago. They went in, defended really heavily, even though I didn't even get in the stadium until Roma had already scored a goal in the first or second minute. But Slavia Prague should do the same thing here at Inter and in San Siro. That could go well, but the problem is Inter are probably going to score. I think, and probably obvious, they're not going to have a 1.5 favorite at home, would not be shut out, but score and probably can score multiple goals. So can they get 4? I don't think that's likely. 3 would be enough to push, and that is probably would be really dangerous as Slavia Prague to score if you're going to play under there. But I think rather than playing the 1.5 goal underdogs in Slavia Prague, I think I'd rather go under 3 here. Inter have certainly been scoring this season so far. Their defense has been problematic, and I think that's something that they're going to be focused on and working to, because they still have what I really liked about Inter coming into the season is they have a ton of depth. I think they have a good chance to win Serie A. They do need to beat Napoli now after a couple stumbles to start the season, and Juve as well. But at this point, to me, I think there's a little bit of a problem with Lautaro Martinez, who's been missing a bunch of matches. I don't know his status for this one on Tuesday, but I think this is a match that Inter want to win, and at 2-0, they're very happy to call off the dogs and protect themselves and try to guarantee themselves 3 points, as opposed to getting caught and making it a tight game. But the push on 3 is pretty valuable, and it looks like we might even get 3.25, which is pretty large for an Inter match going back years and years. Move next to Chelsea hosting Benfica. Currently Chelsea 3/4 goal favorites with all the juice. Totals 2.75, juice all the way to over. Benfica are a wild ride. I mean, we saw them choke a big lead against Barcelona last year in Champions League. They have a lot of the same players. They're still, to me, a factory of young talent that then moves on. But one of those incredibly talented young players, Antonio Silva, is like the center back that's going to be worth the next €100 million transfer, but he's still there. And I'm a little surprised because I feel like he was on the move years ago, but hasn't moved yet. And then they take a 2-0 lead on Qarabağ at home in Lisboa, and really struggled or got equalized at 2-2 in a game that would look like it was over in the first few minutes. And that's a problem going on the road to Chelsea. So I think until Benfica get a full goal of insurance, I'm not interested there. Total at 2.75. I would probably lean over until we get a 3, which it looks like we're already there probably in other places across the market. Benfica are certainly a 1 somewhere, more expensive juice. So I guess I'm interested in that. But until we have that, until it's more reasonably priced, though, I'll a lot of times pay up to get a full push on the 1 as opposed to playing 3/4. I don't know if there's enough there, because Chelsea are great at home. Their team, I'm interested in fading this year, because I do think that they've got a lot to figure out. And they unfortunately got, I think, a little bit out of naivete, unfortunately, from on the road at Bayern last weekend, or in the Champions League 2 weeks ago. But they played just as good as Bayern did and lost. And unfortunately, that's something you can't have happen away from home. Move next to Galatasaray hosting Liverpool. Speaking of teams that take early leads and then get blown out, I believe that was at Eintracht Frankfurt in the opener. Galatasaray 1 goal underdogs at home to Liverpool, with more juice on the home team. Totals 3.25, juice very heavily to over. So Liverpool are not as talented as everyone seems to think they are. Yes, they were Premier League champions by 1 million points last year. I've said it 1 million times if you listen to this podcast. Apologies to Anderson and Joe and all the other normal listeners. I appreciate you. I do. And you probably get sick of me saying the same thing, but I just have not been a believer in Liverpool. They just were in a very bad Premier League last season. There's a ton of depth at Liverpool. I'm still trying to figure out if they know how to play together. We'll see what Alexander Isak and Ekitike, how they end up sharing the striker position, and then plenty of other things as well. One thing I know is going to be there is Virgil van Dijk. He's going to get that defense ready. And Galatasaray, pretty much any Turkish giant or Turkish team that plays in any sort of European competition, they seem to have big names in the Premier League that are past their prime, and they don't defend very well. And that's a bad, bad problem. Can get a little bit ignored, or you can play through it if you can score a bunch of goals at home. And that's what Galatasaray is certainly going to look to do. but I don't want to really play many bad defenses against Liverpool unless I'm getting a full goal of insurance in a really tough place to play. Total at 3.25 suggests that one goal of insurance is not as valuable. I agree with that. But at this point, Galatasaray should have a huge crowd. And losing by a single goal, I think is a very likely possibility. Feels like a number that we could certainly find some room in to either draw, maybe even win, or escape with a single goal loss. Avoid that late empty netter type thing late, and then get out of there with a push and maybe steal a result late. Last but not least, on Tuesday, before we get to the ultimate best bet, Atletico Madrid, or at least the ultimate best bet nomination for Tuesday. So Atletico Madrid, they're 1.25 goal underdogs. 1.25 goal favorites at home to Eintracht Frankfurt. Total is 3, and it's juiced very heavily to over. All the juice on the Frankfurt side, maybe it's falling back to the one that we saw previously, at least when I was tracking lines earlier this week. Atleti, awful start in La Liga. Yes, they were better in Champions League, I guess, scored a couple pretty wild goals from Marcos Llorente, and seems to always do that at Liverpool, but then they still lost the game late. And I think they have real problems closing anybody out, especially by more than a goal. And especially an Eintracht Frankfurt side that are going to travel better than almost any team in this competition. We've seen that from when they won Europa League a few years ago. And Eintracht, while they've sold some of the best striking talents like Etike to Liverpool and Marmoush to Manchester City, both from the same goal-scoring outfit that was dominating the Bundesliga from a pretty slow starting point and was very profitable until Marmoush left pretty much. But I think at this point, to me, Atleti, they go into a shell when they have a lead. They don't want to, and they have players that are more talented than that. But I think with a lead, if it's not 2 goals already, I think Eintracht Frankfurt are going to have a lot of chances to try to cross balls in. They're a lot taller than Atleti, even though Sorloth is a giant up front, and he's usually in there towards the end of the match. But I think Eintracht Frankfurt are certainly worth looking at as a goal and a quarter underdog. 1 is probably minimum for me to be interested just based on where the number is, but I think it's 3/4. I'd still be interested. So that move shouldn't really happen, but I think Eintracht are very competitive here, and I'm going to make that my ultimate best bet nominee for the end of the show. And that will eventually come out on Instagram at @the_real_G_Warner and on YouTube in the shorts area at @the_real_G_Warner. But fading Atleti is something I've been trying to do or have been doing since I kind of gave up on them after a really poor start to 2025 around the holiday season. And I see no reason to get off of that. So moving down to Wednesday, I want to remind everyone about the NFL podcast with _Schnicker. We're recording that Tuesday nights every week. So should be on the docket tomorrow. I'm looking forward to trying to get past a pretty poor weekend for me, but at least the Dolphins came through on Monday night. Also have the Major League Baseball podcast out with Munaf Manji on the pregame.com podcast network. That was recorded tonight. Should be out in probably the wee hours. I know Sleepy's busy with other things tonight, but that should be out there. And there is an early window of games. And if you want betting advice, I would highly recommend patreon.com/real_G_Warner, because that's where all my baseball stuff will be. I think I'm still grading the last day of the season. Haven't watched the Pirates yet, as that doesn't have any sort of playoff implications, but should be around plus 10 or 11 units for the season. A lot thanks to a really good close to the year, really just a bad first month and then getting over that. But it's definitely a wild ride, but also the futures were great with the Brewers and then somehow the Guardians coming out of nowhere to win the division, but both north of 3-1 odds. So it's good, I guess, end of March for me that suddenly pays out in end of September. But plenty on that, of course, and the daily soccer as well as is there. Patreon.com/real_G_Warner. And if you're subscribed to me on other platforms, I think you'd enjoy the price. So check it out. Patreon.com/real_G_Warner. As for Wednesday, we'll move to Union Saint-Gilloise of Belgium hosting Newcastle United of England. Currently, Union Saint-Gilloise, a half-goal underdog at home with all the juice totals, 2.5, juice all the way to over. So Newcastle coming off a big match with Arsenal at home this weekend. Now they head to Belgium to a pretty small neighborhood type of club, and that's going to be a big adjustment. Union Saint-Gilloise, I thought, looked pretty good in their debut in the Champions League. It's amazing that they're here considering how much they've grown, but they've done a great job recruiting. They've put players all across the German Bundesliga and other places across Europe. So I'm a believer, and Newcastle are a very different team away from home. / I think they're really missing Alexander Isak. Like Nick Voltemata is awesome, but getting used to Champions League here, but also the English Premier League, I do have some questions about that. It seems like Newcastle's spine is very much intact with Guimaraes and Joe Linton and all the usuals, but the defensive back line is usually the same, though Dan Burns seems to be a little problematic to me. At least he's not playing fullback anymore like he was at Brighton. But still, I think Union Saint-Gilloise as a half-goal underdog at home is very interesting. I'll lean to under 2.5, but I think I like the side a lot better there. Moving to Karabag, they are hosting FC Copenhagen, who had an incredible back-and-forth match with Bayer Leverkusen. Should have held on, should have won, I thought. But unfortunately, if you can't keep out Alexander Grimaldo and Alex Grimaldo's set pieces, you probably shouldn't give them away. With that said, Karabag pick them right now at home in Azerbaijan, I believe is where they are. Copenhagen with a lot more juice, totals 2.5, juice pretty heavily to over. All the way, looks like 2 3/4 is coming. So I'm curious if what Karabag were able to do against Benfica away from home is more about Benfica's defense, which has been pretty leaky for years, or if that is more about Karabag's offense. I would expect or suspect, especially with a total at 2.5, that it's more about Benfica than it is about Karabag. So Copenhagen are interesting to me. That they're a great bet. I thought, I don't think they ever trailed at home to Leverkusen. I think took 1-0 and 2-1 leads, but weren't unable to hold on for the full 3 points. With that said, they're going to miss their home crowd a lot. I think as Karabag move to a decent sized underdog, then I'm more interested. But at Pick'em, I'm probably good enough to look the other way and maybe lean to under 2.5 in this one currently. We'll move next to Monaco hosting Manchester City. Monaco 1.25 goal underdogs at home with more juice. On the underdog, totals 3.25, juice very heavily to under. So I'm not a believer in Manchester City. They've certainly shown they have some attacking talent and some ability that we might not have seen for a little while, especially not at the end of last season or most of last season. But Monaco, to me, the big question is what are they going to get from home support, which is usually not much in the Stade Louis II. Apparently, there's a lot to do in Monaco. I didn't really notice that. I feel like Champions League soccer, if you're into soccer and you're into the club, you probably should show up. But they haven't really had a great home field advantage. And so that does minimize my interest a little bit, or at least it lessens my interest in the home underdog. With that said, they lose by a single goal and they are covering, at least winning half of a bet right now at current prices. So I'm interested in the home team. I think Monaco have some big names. They have some talent. They certainly are a club that sells their talent away to bigger clubs throughout Europe. And we'll see when Paul Pogba is making a difference for this team. But at this point, to me, I just don't know what I've seen from Pep Guardiola's side. I think Erling Haaland has scored a ton of goals for Manchester City, but to me, he's not a great value to their club, and I think he's made them a lot easier to defend because it takes another shifty creator out of the lineup, and I think Pep Guardiola is kind of stuck with it. So biggest interest is Monaco, 1.25 goal underdogs. We could see a lot of goals here, though, so I'm a little nervous about any underlean in that one, Joe Dollar. Move next to Arsenal, 2-goal favorites, Olympiacos of Piraeus in Greece, Athens neighborhood. Total is 3.25, juice very heavily to under, and Arsenal are going to dominate this game. Olympiacos, I would suspect, just like the rest of the Premier League, is going to go in and try to play as defensively as possible and keep a clean sheet as long as possible. For that reason, the 2 is of interest because it's a round number, and I love those, but I think under 3.25 is my bigger interest. The big question is how many do Arsenal score, and I'm concerned they score a lot. Borussia Dortmund, as I'm wearing the kit. If you're watching live on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, please leave a 5-star review. If you're on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, I just said that. If you're on YouTube, hit subscribe at @thereal_G Warner. The reviews are really helpful. I guess while I'm here, I might as well check to see if I got any new ones. But thank you for all of you that have gone in there. And I really appreciate that as I try not to choke if I have any water somewhere nearby. Okay, let's check. And I guess while we're here, let's make sure everyone can hear me. No updates from Anderson, so I guess we're still good on audio if you're in the live version right now in StreamYard. Dang, yeah, it's been a while since we got a review. 28 ratings, though, 4.7 out of 5. We need to do better than that. Whoever gave me a 1-star, you can fuck off. Excuse my French. This tout doesn't track his record properly. He's a scammer. From May 18th, 2025. Thank you, D. Blez, whoever you are. I do track my record regularly, and if you were a Patreon subscriber, you'd be able to see it. But anyway, here we are. Back to it. Borussia Dortmund, half a goal favorite at home with almost all the juice. Totals 2.5, juiced a little bit more to over. So Dortmund are a really great team at home, and it's hard to fade them in with the yellow wall behind them. Stood in it before, wearing the same exact shirt, and it's really hard. Athletic Club Bilbao, I think, are really good and are going to do well in this competition, but I am concerned how they balance La Liga and Champions League because they haven't been at this level in a while. They were in Europa League last year, which was also new. Things went pretty well until I think the semifinals or so, where they lost to Manchester United, if I remember correctly, a lot because of an early red card, which was pretty poor refereeing decision, in my humble opinion, but let that go to the side. I think the big question is, at what price am I interested in Athletic Club? Looks like 3/4 of a goal underdog could be happening. So that does offer some safety on a single goal loss, at least. Total at 2.5 feels low, and it reflects Athletic Club. But from a Dortmund perspective, I just don't really want to play any unders with them in their home building. I could see them because they play a lot more defensively away from home in Champions League. They don't do that in the Bundesliga, and that's why they struggle there. I think I need more from Athletic Club than a half of a goal, which we probably won't get. At least we're not going to get a full goal of insurance. Move next is Napoli hosting Sporting Lisboa, who have not been the same club since Ruben Amorim left for Manchester United, and he's not done well there, and probably should go back. Napoli, half a goal favorites, the more juice, totals 2.5, juice all the way to over. Napoli are, to me, pretty talented and added a bunch of talent with, I guess, some player sales they did this year. Sporting Lisboa, I don't think I can trust them away from home. And Napoli used to be a really crazy under team with Antonio Conte, but there's been a lot of goals in their matches this year, which has kind of caught me off guard. So I don't know that I have anything in that matchup. Now, probably the biggest named match, Barcelona hosting PSG, defending champion PSG, and Barcelona, probably the most popular club in the world. Mees Canaan Club, as they say all over everything. Barcelona currently half a goal favorite with a little bit more juice. Totals 3.5, juice all the way to under. So feels like a big price on PSG. Yes, they could lose away from home. Certainly could happen. But I'm just not sure necessarily that I'm going to pay or I guess give up on PSG away from home, as they've been the domination of Inter Milan. Yes, things can or snowball when they got off to a great start in the Champions League final. But it's hard for me to forget that. And I think getting a draw on the road at Barcelona is very, very possible. I think the Barcelona high line is also something that PSG is probably some of the best talent to potentially pierce through. And that's a lot of risk being taken by Hansi Flick. So PSG half a goal underdog is certainly my interest there. Move next to Bayer Leverkusen, half a goal favorites with almost all the juice. Total is 3, just a little bit more to under. So Bayer Leverkusen are a team I've been trying to be against, though PSV Eindhoven probably with the most disappointing performance in the opener of any club that I saw, at least in the Champions League opener. From a Eindhoven perspective, I mean, they're so much better at home than they are away from home, but that's the big problem is they're away here. I don't really believe in Leverkusen. They bounced back pretty well to sacking Erik ten Hag after 2 matches. Fortunately, missed a lot of opportunity to make money against him and against Leverkusen, but I think Eindhoven at half of a goal, I'm interested. I think I need a little bit more to actually play. And to the last matchup, Villarreal hosting Juventus. Currently, Villarreal quarter goal favorites with a little bit more juice on Juve. Total is 2.5, juice pretty heavily to under right now. So I think Villarreal are going to really struggle balancing Champions League and La Liga. I think they are too thin of a roster. I think they've lost a lot of goal scorers, and I think that's a big, big problem, especially as a favorite to Juve, who have shown really surprise ability to score goals this season. I don't know necessarily that Juve are going to do that forever, but they've added a lot of talent. Don't really love the Jonathan David signing, but Luis Openda, I think, is a great move and could do well there. Chico Conceição is impossible to stop at this point, and I don't know that Villarreal in a stadium of yellow really will have much ability to stop things like that. I think Villarreal are a team I'd like to be against. Their goalkeeper's incredible error to start off the match at Tottenham was really bad luck, and they didn't really concede again, which is a little bit surprising to me, but didn't score either. I think Juve is a quarter goal underdog. There's a lot of value there. I lean a little bit to under, but I think Juve have been scoring too many goals in their matches for me to be that close to it. So I think that's probably one I will stay away from, I guess, or at least I'm not going to make it my ultimate best bet portion of the show. So that's where we are. That's where we are at this point. Check if you've got any comments coming in. Thanks again, Anderson, for checking in on the audio. Appreciate that. And of course, audio should be fine for all the later editions of the show. But thanks for tuning in. Want to remind everyone there's a pregame.com podcast out there talking about Major League Baseball. Go check that out with Munaf. Went over the entire first day of the playoffs, made some picks for the wild card round, who would advance, but plenty more information, patreon.com. So it's @real_G Warner. Best spot to get all my plays, leans right across all sports. For the ultimate best bet portion of the show, we're at just over 30 minutes. So thanks for all tuning in, especially if you're late night on live with Anderson. From Tuesday, I'll go Eintracht Frankfurt, a 1.25 goal underdog is my best bet. On Wednesday, I'll go PSG, half a goal underdog on the road at Barcelona. But for the ultimate best bet on this episode for Champions League Match Day 2, the year of our Lord 2025, I'll go with PSG, half of a goal underdog. I think it's going to be a very competitive match. I think they do have the horses to bother Barcelona. And let's see if Barcelona can get a big home win against what was the best team last season and one that only seemed to get stronger. And team honestly has done a lot more to get better players in. And we'll see how well Kvaratskhelia and such do on the road at Barca. So that'll do it for this episode. Thank you all for tuning in. Please hit the subscribe button, or if you want to interact, at @real_G Warner across any social media platform. Probably check Patreon the most, but Twitter's there too. And I'll talk to you all soon on a Europa League podcast coming out on Wednesday night, if you're looking at the soccer side of things, and a NFL podcast with _Schnicker coming out for week 5. That'll be recorded tomorrow night, Tuesday, September 30th. Talk to you all soon.
Recording stopped.